Hi everyone! So now I want to show you how to bind off in the round. Binding off in the round is very similar to binding off flat, and we're going to actually be focusing more on how to weave in the ends for a truly invisible finish at the end. So before you bind off, you want to make sure you have at least 3 times the circumference of your knitting for this bind off. Usually on your circular needle, the stitches are a little bit squished, so just measure around your cast on edge if they are of equal width to just make sure you have enough yarn. Here I have plenty, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start. So you'll see this is my beginning of round marker right here. I'm just gonna come to it. And at this point, I'm going to remove my stitch marker because I won't be needing it anymore. So this is where you will start your bind off. I'm going to start by knitting 2 stitches. And like binding off in the flat, I'm going to pass that first stitch that I knit over the second. I'm just going to do that over and over again until I come back to the beginning of the round. And you'll see now that I've bound off a few, the reason why I didn't need that stitch marker anymore. The only stitches that remain on my needle are for the remainder of the round, because you'll see that this is the last stitch of that round and this is the first stitch that I bound off. So we're going to keep going, and just a quick reminder to be binding off very loosely so that you'll get as much stretch as you need on your bind off edge. You'll see that a little bit of give goes a long way. And now we're just going to zoom along. And now I'm coming to my last stitch. I'm going to knit that, and I'm going to bind off as usual. And when you have 1 stitch left on your needle, you're going to remove your needle, pull that yarn through. I'm going to cut it right there. Leaving yourself a tail of about 6 to 10 inches. And you'll see that your bind off edge matches your cast on edge pretty well. That's your cast on, it's this little braid, and your bind off with this little braid on top of it. However, unlike your cast on, which has a pretty much invisible join at the beginning, do you see that? Your bind off is going to have this gap where your last stitch hasn't met your first stitch. So what we're going to do is just fix that quickly with your seaming. So I'm just going to quickly thread my tapestry needle here. And you'll see with this braid, just take a moment to look closely at what's happening here. So you'll see that this loop is actually wrapped around the yarn that's coming around this stitch. So what we want to do is secure this last stitch to the first stitch of the round. What I'm going to do is simply go to the base of the next braid, insert my needle through it, and pull it around and tighten so that they meet. And there you go. You've joined the last stitch to the first stitch. Now what do you do with the rest of the tail? If you've been progressing through our projects, and this is your first project that you're going to need to actually weave in your ends, because with the others, you've simply been seaming and burying the end in your seam. So my favorite way to do this is to turn your work around to the back side. We always want to be weaving our ends in on the wrong side so we don't see it. Is to just quickly bring my needle through a stitch, through one of these purl bumps, come up and then down, and go across, up and then down. And then after I've done a few stitches, I'm going to come back through down and go backwards. And that way I know that end is super secure. If you need a clearer version of what that looks like, I've done it here in a contrasting color. So you'll see the yarn comes up and down and just through those purl bumps. And then we're just going to continue it through. I'm going to thread my tapestry needle again. We're just going to continue it through by coming down a row. And you're not going to see this at all when it's in the same color yarn. Coming down and then up and down and up, so on and so forth. Just make sure not to pull too tightly so you don't make your stitches pucker. And there you go. That's how to weave in ends. Happy knitting.